of peace. Until that day comes, we stand strong and alert. Our eyes are fixed to the north and our hearts praying for the day when all Koreans can live in freedom. Thank you. God bless you. God bless the Korean people. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Coming up, we cross the plains with men and machines as some young workers bring in the harvest of the Heartland. Oklahoma farmers look back on the trials and opportunities that emerged from America's Dust Bowl. And some families down south celebrate their heritage and music that comes from the farms of the Mississippi Delta. America's Heartland is next.
You can see it in the eyes of every woman and man in America's heartland, living close to the land. There's a love for the country and a pride in the brand in America's heartland, living close to the land in America's heartland.
Hello and welcome to America's Heartland. I'm Paul Ryan. From springtime through the fall, they cut a wide swath south to north through the great American heartland. Young people from places like Ireland, New Zealand, Australia, taking in the grain harvests behind the wheels of giant combines. Now, if you're a regular viewer of America's Heartland, you may already have seen these unsung heroes of the Heartland back when they were learning their trade in Edson, Kansas. Well, that was 3 months ago. Now they're grizzled veterans, having harvested their way all the way to the Canadian border. And Jason Schultz caught up with them.
It's harvesting time in northern Montana. Behind the wheels of the combines in the fields and the trucks hauling the grain aren't the seasoned farmers from the Heartland. They're fresh-faced young men from across the Atlantic, like Ireland's Sean Keegan.
It's very exciting because we're getting to see something new. The next move we go, like, you know, we're getting to see a new part of America, new ways that things are being done.
Sean is one of a handful of foreign workers for Ferris Brothers Incorporated. These young men signed up to work with Ferris through an Ohio State University work exchange program.
We had to push extremely hard, and I've never felt caught up all summer. We're getting close now.
The harvester's journey started around the end of May in Oklahoma. It's now about mid-August. 1,800 miles later, they're in northern Montana, way northern Montana. They're harvesting right along the U.S.-Canadian border.
Back at home, we're used to one base, and we might travel in a, we'll say, 20-mile radius to do all our work. But here, I think it's somewhere up around nearly 1,800 miles we've traveled, seeing that vast scenery and everything, like the vast amount of traveling we've done to complete the harvest, like, has been great.
That's going to be part of the problem. Yeah.
Rick Ferris has been traveling the country harvesting since he was a young man, following in his father's footsteps. He and his nephew run the company now.
Okay, there's 4 total strips there, and we'll just
Instead of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on equipment and manpower, farmers like Don Naj contract with Rick and his team to arrive each year just in time to harvest their crops. Don farms 4,000 acres of wheat, barley, and canola.
Rick comes in and is able to do it far more efficiently and obviously quicker than we can. He's been cutting our crop since, I believe, 1986 for us, and just does a fantastic job. We're always very happy with the quality of the work that's done.
This will show the different functions. A lot of this stuff.
Many of the young harvesters come from farming backgrounds, but not quite on the scale of American agriculture. They're used to smaller plots of land and smaller equipment. So before their nearly 2,000-mile harvesting trip begins, they go through several weeks of training.
That reel will strip grain off the backside of the head.
Call it Ferris University, learning about calibrating combine gears or simply how to drive these big machines. It's here where they also get used to their summer living arrangements, bunk beds in RVs for the entire crew.
Me and Jory stay here.
Before setting out, Sean was excited about his impending harvesting adventure. But 13 weeks later in Montana, is he still feeling positive?
I think we're working well as a team, like, you know, we're working fairly well, like, so I think we're on it. I'm not sure what everybody else thinks. But we haven't had any rows so far, and we've all got along well. Do you think is there much left out there to come in?
You got a sense of accomplishment when you haul that load of grain in and dump it. That sense of accomplishment is a big deal to these young men.
After a 13-hour day in the field, the crew comes in to get a few hours of rest. Their accommodations for this round of harvesting, the back lot of a roadside greasy spoon. The restaurant owner leaves the fires on past closing time for these weary harvesting warriors. There's just enough time for a game of pool and some biscuits and gravy.
Thank you very much. It's been around. People have been good. Every restaurant we've been into, people have been asking us, oh, where are you from? And they've been really friendly to us, like, so definitely they've made us feel welcome anyway.
This year's harvest is winding down. Soon these young men will return to their homelands with their own tales from America's heartland. Until then, it's time to get some rest.
While Montana gets its nickname as the Treasure State because of the importance of mining, the state is also one of America's largest producers of wheat and barley. In fact, Montana produces more than 5 million acres of wheat crops each year. One other ag fact about Montana: it ranks in the top 5 as a producer of honeybee colonies.
Often, necessity makes migrants out of farmers and farm workers, but sometimes a catastrophe does. And by far, the worst ever to hit the heartland was the Dirty 30s, the so-called Oklahoma Dust Bowl that ruined farms and farmers from North Dakota to Texas. Much has been written about those years, about the so-called Okies moving on to safer climates such as California's. But many stayed on the land while dust and drought buried everything they knew. Many are still there, though, still telling their stories, and I met up with some of them in the Oklahoma Panhandle, the epicenter of the Dust Bowl.
Yes, that all hit in a very short time. The drought hit, depression hit, and the dust storms all hit all about the same time. So many people left, we stayed with it, and it's worked out all right.
92-year-old Orville Clemens still farms near the land where he grew up in Guyman, Oklahoma, and he remembers well the difficult days of the Oklahoma Dust Bowl.
Them clouds would start showing up in the horizon in the north. You just see it, a little bit of cloud, looked like a cloud, and in an hour and a half's time, everything was blacked out.
The severe drought and dust storms of the 1930s weren't limited just to Oklahoma. Neighboring states of Kansas, Colorado, New Mexico, and Texas were also affected. But we know the situation mostly from John Steinbeck's novel, The Grapes of Wrath, about beleaguered small farmers escaping the Oklahoma Dust Bowl.
When the land began to blow, nobody was there to even try to stop it. At the beginning of the Dust Bowl, there were approximately 26,000 people in Beaver County. At the end of the Dust Bowl, there were 6,000.
And those left behind agree that there was one overriding reason that kept many families from packing up and moving away.
Well, one thing would make us stay was finance, to have money to get away.
Too poor to leave. I don't really know how they held it together.
Historians say that the accepted farming techniques of the time exposed Oklahoma soil to the ravages of nature, a situation aggravated by 7 long years of drought.
In 1902 and 1903, we began a big influx of people from the Midwest, people who came out here and of course didn't know about farming practices like we do today, probably should never have been plowed, so that by the time the drought hit in 1931, all that land was open. And we always have lots of wind here. All that land began to blow.
Imogene Glover's memories of those hard and dusty days are captured in the images on the canvases that she's created.
They needed to know what we lived through. And I couldn't tell them except to paint it. I'd run from the chicken house to the house when those dust storms first started, and oh, it would burn and sting my legs. We ran to the cellar, just hand-dug dirt hole with boards laid across it and dirt piled on top of that so the boards wouldn't blow away. I'd sit in the corner and read funny books or Big Little books while the storm was the worst.
The dust storms not only wreaked havoc on the land, the quantity and powder-like quality of the dust also created serious health issues.
2 or 3 of our neighbors died with dust pneumonia. And what they do, a lot of people did, would wet sheets and put over the windows and things, you know, the damp sheet would catch dust.
Well, my brother had dust pneumonia. They thought he was going to die, but he lived.
Killed a lot of...
Oh, a lot of young people and older people.
The dust took its toll on livestock as well.
During the 34 and 35 in the late spring, the cattle were dying from dust clogging up their noses.
The Dust Bowl meant desperate times for farmers who lost homes and loved ones. But many who left Oklahoma did find new opportunities in California and the Northwest. And for many who remained, the intervening years have brought happier endings.
My brother and my sister and I are all benefiting from the fact that he kept land and added to it. And we get royalties from gas and oil, and that helps.
As a result of the Dust Bowl in the 1930s, the U.S. Department of Agriculture established a number of programs that help farmers reseed a lot of that land to the native grasses that grew here. Because the land was not lying open to the wind when the droughts came, we didn't have another Dust Bowl.
The Oklahoma Panhandle, once part of Mexico and then Texas, became a no-man's land when Texas was admitted to the Union in the 1840s. As state boundaries around the Panhandle shifted, ranchers and farmers moved in, calling it unofficially the Cimarron Territory. Efforts to establish their own government failed, and by 1890, Washington assigned this no-man's land to the new territory of Oklahoma. Still to come on America's Heartland, a West Virginia firm uses farm fresh to serve up the flavors of home-style cooking. Then, music from the South as the blues come to life in the farmlands of the Mississippi Delta.
When the Heartland's food industry entrepreneurs come up with new ideas for hot new products, that's usually good news for farmers and ranchers. Just think of Colonel Sanders and America's poultry producers. Well, the state of West Virginia now has its own version of the Colonel, but without the goatee. His name is Roy Ellswick, and he's turning West Virginia-style home cooking into a marketing sensation.
I love food. I love how food works. I love how it tastes, and I'm inquisitive.
Those ingredients are the ones Roy Ellswick believes spell success. He's the owner-president of Tasty Blend Foods in Tays Valley, West Virginia. The 53-year-old Ellswick founded the business in 1987, producing a small line of dry baking mixes. Today, his company is turning out 35 to 40 tons of product a day, including his signature biscuits and gravy. They're the kind of down-home foods he watched his mother make.
And she would add pinches of this, pinches of that, dabs loaves of this, and she made cornbread, biscuits, gravy, just all kinds of pancakes, and I just always admired that in my mother.
As a boy, Ellswick spent his summers as a waiter, work that led to a fulfilling career as an executive in the fast food industry. But he longed for more. He wanted to create his own food mixes for restaurants.
It took me 6 months to do this process, and I used about 200 gallons of buttermilk, 2,000 pounds of flour, all kinds of salt and sugar and different ingredients to make our first product.
Biscuits like Mom used to make.
Mama could make mean biscuits, so I wanted to do the biscuits first.
When he first started out, Ellswick would hop into his motorhome and sell his biscuits directly to the public at a farmer's market. Well, they ate him up, and the next thing you know, Tasty Blend Foods and the Teays Valley label were born. Ellswick built a processing plant that today blends 4,000 pounds of product, including a mashed potato mix, in 10 minutes. Good products sell themselves, but enthusiasm helps. He also has a folksy advertising campaign that he's run since he started the business in 1987.
So we're taking a walk down memory lane. I guess these commercials really took off.
They did, and they mean a lot to me.
The trouble is, whenever it's test day at the plant, I just can't get any work out of my staff.
Homespun humor and Ellswick's down-home food mixes have garnered him many honors. The one he likes most is a tongue-in-cheek tribute from his staff.
Yeah, we've got my favorite Kingfish Award.
And why is that your favorite?
Well, let me read it to you. It says, Roy Ellswick, Kingfish of Tasty Blend Foods Incorporated. The fish always rots from the head down. Your array of fish will never rot because you are the head of our fish. Great job, your school of fish. That's from my employees.
Ellswick says that motto means that the head of a company leads by example, and he tries to set a good one. He gives a lot of credit to his employees for helping to build his business. Tasty Blend products are sold in 23 states. The West Virginia Department of Agriculture rates it as one of the state's top agribusinesses. But the thing that really drives Roy Ellswick is his own past.
Where I came from, what I didn't have, and what I do have today, and how I got from not having to having.
Chickens are West Virginia's #1 agricultural product, but the state ranks in the top 10 for apple production in the United States. In fact, the Golden Delicious variety of apples was first cultivated in West Virginia. The Golden Delicious apple is also West Virginia's official state fruit.
Now we'll head south, way south, into Mississippi's storied Delta region. Land of cotton, land of catfish, land of the blues. Like country and western music, the Mississippi Delta Blues is a distinctly American music, born out of the hearts and hardships of farmers. The songs that have been around for generations are still being sung, and new ones still being written. They can be heard on many a front porch and in juke joints deep in blues country. Jason Schultz visits a couple of the region's premier bluesmen on their downtime.
We gonna have a party.
It's a sultry summer night in Jackson, Mississippi. After the sun is set, singer Jackie Bell is heating things up inside the 930 Blues Cafe. Like most nights, it's standing room only at one of Mississippi's hottest spots for live blues music. Of course, in these parts, blues isn't just a musical style, it's a way of life. For generations, this fertile soil has produced cotton by the truckload, but the rich soil didn't make everyone in these parts wealthy. Out of this region's extreme poverty grew something else, blues music.
You know the blue will make you feel like you done lost everything you had.
About 30 miles from Jackson, in the tiny town of Bentonia, is Jimmy Duck Holmes and his Blue Front Cafe.
Well, it was labeled as a juke joint years ago. Now, don't ask me what a juke joint is. My parents got it back in 1948, and they ran into the early 70s, and I came on board. And my mother sort of like kind of mentored me through it, and then she cut it loose completely.
Bentonia sits just on the edge of Mississippi's Delta region, a swath of land that stretches along the Mississippi River in the western part of the state. The origins of Delta blues can be traced to juke joints around Mississippi and just relaxing after a hard day's work.
See, when I was a kid, this is June. Probably we would still be in the field chopping cotton all day long, as hot as it is right now, trying to get finished before the 4th of July.
In the hot sun?
Hot sun. Right now, we chop until the sun go down.
The most famous blues musician from these parts is B.B. King. Here in Bentonia, they have their own brand of blues.
Yes, you got me screaming all that.
This is your tribute wall right here.
Exactly. That's Jack Owen. He's one of the one that carried the Bentonia style of music to the world.
Right there.
Matter of fact, he carried it to the world. Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, Bobby Rush, because those guys was non-professional. People love to talk about good times they had. And they also like to talk about bad times. Blues tell a story. Yeah, well, early one morning, I was on my way to school. You'd have to actually have worked in the cotton field to understand what those guys was talking about.
Many of the juke joints that thrived 80 years ago are gone. The blues scene in these parts isn't what it used to be, but there are still people working hard to keep it alive.
It was early one morning, drove my mama
In the town of Leland, visitors can find out about the Delta Blues past and present at the Highway 61 Blues Museum. Not far away, a mural honoring Delta Blues musicians. One of them, local farmer Harry "Bub" Branton.
First guitar I ever saw was in my dad's shop. I had a tractor driver, a black guy, showed me some blues, and a white guy showed me some Chuck Berry, so that was my first taste of it. Mama bought a chicken, thought it was a duck, put it on the table with its legs, stick it up, you got to pile it up and go. We're growing about 1,000 acres of corn this year, 1,000 acres of cotton, and the balance of soybeans. I heard 10, 5 and then 5. She may be 600 acres of catfish. Years, but she ain't too old to shift them gears. She got to bottle it up and go. Bottle it up and go. All you have. Well, when I was growing up, it was still a plantation, and they had mules and picked cotton by hand, and the laborers singing, in the field while they worked, and it was really interesting. Agriculture was tough, back 50 years ago. I think that's where, the blues were born out of. It was really rural hand labor agriculture, that era, that probably died around 1955 or so, when mechanization moved in. Bottle up and go.
With the exception of Harry Branton, there are very few blues musicians farming these days. But the stories of hard work and heartache that grew out of the rich Mississippi soil are still a part of today's blues scene.
Well, it's so expressive, and I think it's easier to relate to the emotions that are being expressed through the music, because it's not intellectual music at all. It's not a head trip. It's a gut trip and a heart trip.
Hey, watch this.
You know that blues ain't nothing.
Back in Bentonia, Jimmy Duck Holmes isn't getting rich playing the blues, but he doesn't mind.
It's nothing but a storyteller with an instrument. You know that blues ain't nothing. Those blues singers tell it what they feeling from their heart. But a man that's feeling bad. And what makes that so? If you went out and had a bad night, a bad week, or a bad year, and want to tell somebody about it, what's wrong with that? You know the blues will make it feel like you done lost everything you had.
Jimmy welcomes blues fans from around the globe. Heck, he might even pick up the guitar.
Well, now the blues been my companion every night, every day.
He has just one request: sign the wall.
All right.
Probably the greatest of all Delta bluesmen was Robert Johnson. Blues legend Son House once said of Johnson, he sold his soul to the devil to get to play like that. And that's our show for today. Thanks for watching. I'm Paul Ryan. We hope to see you next time right here in America's Heartland.
There's much more on America's Heartland at our website, including video on the stories from today's show. You can also give us your feedback. Just log on to americasheartland.org.
You can see it in the eyes of every woman and man in America's heartland, living close to the land. There's a love for the country and a pride in the brand in America's heartland, living close to the land.
It's 5:30 a.m. on Swans Island, Maine, and the lobster boats are headed out. A couple of hours later, just before low tide, University of Pennsylvania ecologist Peter Petratus and a team are headed out too. With support from the National Science Foundation, Petratus and company have returned every summer for nearly 2 decades to this rocky intertidal zone, surveying a network of 60 experimental plots all around the island.
We set down the quadrat and we count everything. We count all the mobile species and we estimate the percent cover of the things that are attached, like seaweeds and barnacles and so on.
We got 322.
The big question that brings them back year after year: is an ecosystem like this a stable and permanent fixture, or under harsh conditions, could it reach a tipping point?
The idea is that with changes in conditions, you could suddenly switch from one community type to the other.
Ecologists have watched such switches happen before, sometimes with undesirable consequences, like coral reefs degraded by human activities, or loss of grasslands.
Certainly that's the case in the southwestern part of the United States, where you had a conversion from edible grasslands to scrubby areas that basically are not productive for livestock.
So we're looking at why some places have mussel beds, some places have rockweeds, and what causes the switch between them.
The team set out to watch a switch in progress here on Swans Island. Every few decades, powerful winter storms blow in and push sea ice over the rocks, scouring them completely clean. Each time, all the plants and animals that live here have to rebuild their ecosystem. Ideal conditions for a switch to happen. They even help Mother Nature along, periodically scraping the rocks clean with tools.
It actually looks like that the past isn't a particularly good predictor for the future.
They've documented about a third of these sites switching from mussel beds to rockweed stands and vice versa.
We count organisms on the rock and compare it to what it originally was after we did the initial scraping and keep track of how it changes over time.
And changes keep coming. In the last few years, the mussel beds have been largely wiped out, in part due to invasive green crabs.
So in some cases, we have clearings that we would expect to fill in with either rockweeds or mussels that are not filling in with anything, that are simply bare spots.
Petratus says this work shows abrupt switches can and do happen. So maybe we shouldn't bet too heavily on the resilience of the natural world to maintain the status quo, especially in a changing world.
Many people think of resilience because they go out and see the same thing year after year. Once that switch occurs, it's often very difficult to reverse it.
So the old adage is true. The one thing that's constant is change. Here, you can count on it. For Science Nation, I'm Miles O'Brien.
Welcome to English in a Minute.
Straw is the dry stems of grain plants. Grasping is holding something firmly.
Grasping at straws.
I can't find the scripts for our next project.
Around the desk.
Yes, they aren't there.
Maybe they're in the trash can? Did you look in the trash can?
Now you are really grasping at straws.
To grasp at straws means to be so desperate that you try anything to help yourself in a difficult situation. Some word experts say it comes from a saying, "A drowning man will catch at a straw." Straw floats, but is not strong enough to hold someone above water. And that's English in a minute.
John Davis, and this is Motor Week. Join us as we slip into the renewed style and luxury of the Buick Encore. Pat Goss has the tools to keep you on the cutting edge of car care. Zach Maskell gets his total Corvette on. Then it's more of every kind of performance in the Porsche 911 GTS. So come drive with us next.
Motor Week, television's original automotive magazine.
The Buick Encore was an early entrant into what has become a crowded and highly competitive subcompact luxury crossover segment. So in order to maintain its early lead, it gets a few updates, ones that should keep it Buick's #1 selling vehicle, as well as keep competitors on their toes. We've been admirers of the Buick Encore since it first arrived for 2013. GM was clearly ahead of the small luxury crossover trend. But with so many other brands jumping into the segment, it didn't take long for Encore to look a little stale. This 2017 edition is more than just a flashy refresh, however, with significant updates that should have plenty of fans calling for another Encore. But starting with the sheet metal, everything forward of the A-pillars is new. Most prominent is a rounder nose, sporting Buick's new winged grille. Both hood and fenders are smoother. This more modern design is clearly better looking, but we have to say it is also less distinctive than before. Inside, just about everything in front of the driver has been updated. The dash layout is enhanced, getting a more cockpit-style form. Upgraded materials, and better fitment for the new 8-inch color touchscreen. Some built-to-price reminders remain, and it's still nowhere near as luxurious feeling as competitors like the Lexus NX, but all in all, it's a big improvement. Keyless entry with push-button start are new, as are the 4.2-inch color info display in the gauge cluster, and available Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Rear seat room continues to be tight, but adult space is more than plentiful up front. Cargo space remains merely adequate at 18.8 cubic feet, 48.4 with seatbacks folded, though the Encore is one of the few remaining vehicles that also has a fold-flat front passenger seat for toting longer items. For 2016, Sport Touring trim arrived, and with it, more power for the 1.4-liter i4 Turbo. It now outputs 153 horsepower and 177 pound-feet of torque. The 138 horsepower version remains standard, as does a 6-speed automatic transmission. Active on-demand all-wheel drive is available. While we didn't find that base engine underpowered previously, the Sport's added pep is much appreciated, especially for highway merging. you feel like you have a little more control over your situation. Now, Encore is not as refined feeling on the road as its larger Buick crossover siblings, but it is noticeably quieter than chassis-made Chevrolet Trax. Put it to the test at the track, this Encore gets to 60 well over a second quicker than the original at 8.6 seconds. There's enough torque for a snappy launch, but things taper off pretty significantly on the top end. Factor in slow, momentum-killing shifts from the transmission, and the quarter mile seems to take a lot longer than the indicated 16.6 seconds at 83 miles per hour. Not exactly thrilling, but again, over a second faster than before. Nothing changes in the chassis department, so the surprisingly fun and nimble nature that we praised is still in effect. Here is where you notice the Encore's Opal design roots the most. Push too hard, however, and traction control is quick to shut the party down. Steering is quick, has good weight, and even decent feel. Body roll is relatively minor. 115 feet was our average stopping distance from 60, with good stability and only slight fade after repeated runs. Government fuel economy ratings for our sport touring all-wheel driver are 26 city, 31 highway, and 28 combined. So our 27.8 miles per gallon average on regular was right on. Slightly better than average for the energy impact score, using 11.8 barrels of oil yearly with annual CO2 emissions of 5.2 tons. Pricing starts at just $23,915, though for that you get front-wheel drive only. The cost for adding all-wheel drive varies as you escalate the trim levels from there. If you want heated seats, you'll have to step up to Essence trim, putting you close to $30,000. Without a doubt, the Buick Encore has been a big success, so making it more appealing to more people seems like a no-brainer. That's what GM has done, and it's sure to keep the band playing on. Our success story this week takes us to Asheville, North Carolina, where they're driving on sunshine. Brightfield Transportation Solutions has deployed over 100 EV charging stations in North Carolina and beyond. Some are standalones, while others, like this one at Earth Fair, a regional grocer, integrate solar power. The 8 solar panels can provide up to 15,000 miles of zero-emission solar-powered driving every year.
If you drive an EV and you're powered off of the average grid mix in America, you're going to see a 60% reduction in your greenhouse gas emissions. If you go to driving on sunshine, it's a 100% reduction.
Retailers, universities, and cities purchase Brightfields to attract EVs, showcasing their clean energy commitment and building goodwill. With help from the Land of Sky Clean Vehicles Coalition, more stakeholders are investing in EV charging stations to keep the Tar Heel State's highlands bright. Just follow the American flags and the burnout marks, and like our over-the-edge guy, Zach Maskell, you'll wind up at the world's biggest all-Corvette show. So let's tag along with Zach as he pops the hoods on both the cars and the judges' heads to get an inside look at what it takes to drive away with a trophy for the best plastic fantastic.
From this 1953 Corvette cutaway to the minty fresh revived Stingrays of today, the 35th anniversary of this 4-day show includes burnout competitions, part installs, and special guests like Reeves Calloway.
Around 60,000 fans from around the world gather here at Carlisle, Pennsylvania. There's over 5,000 Corvettes with every year and model being represented.
People come from all over the world. They come from Australia, they come from New Zealand, they come from Europe. And then they come locally from the Mid-Atlantic and points west of the Mississippi, and they all want to come to celebrate America's sports car.
Although 1 million vets have been made, the Holy Grail has not been lost. In 1967, GM wanted to build a pure drag and road racing car to compete against Porsche and Ferrari.
They came up with this, the L88.
20 were made that year, 16 are known to still exist, and 8 are right here. And I found a common theme around the Carlisle Fairgrounds. No one would even consider selling me their car.
Now, as long as I got my health, it's going to stay with me for a long, long time because I'm just blessed to have a piece of history like this.
With these few worth around $30 million collectively, even if I had the dough, I can understand